our grade 9, we have already started speaking about the continent of Africa and also the geography of that continent. We have mentioned many of the feature and geography that can shape this continent and help it a lot in just making the continent so diverse in both people and also civilization. So, in this topic, we have started speaking about the continent of Africa. We said that the continent of Africa is to be diverse in the region and the climate. For Northern Africa, we have the Sahara Desert, which is the largest Sahara in the whole planet. This area here governs most of the continent. For Central Africa, we have the rainforests because they go just across the equator, which is the center line of our planet. To the north and the south of the rainforests, we will have the savanna region. For the savanna region, it's a very plain area, and that area has a very large grass called savanna. For here in the east of Africa and to the northern west of Africa, we have the mountainous region, and here to the southwest of Africa, we have also a desert region. So all of these diverse places have played an important role in the civilization of that continent. The oldest civilization in that continent that is known as the Egyptian civilization, and its neighboring one, the Nubian civilization. So today we will speak about both Egypt and Nubia. Of course, at one time, both Egypt and Nubia were just one civilization because the ancient pharaohs of Egypt have already governed both of these regions. So they were not two countries, two separate countries, but they were just one country. Does anyone hear me? No, we cannot hear you. Unplug your jack and insert it again. And Mr. Yusuf has already joined us as late as usual. That's great. Only text? No, I don't need any text. Okay. Still with me, grade 9?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. So in today's session, we'll speak about the civilization that was neighboring to the ancient Egyptian civilization, which is the Nubian civilization. The Nubian civilization started to arise in this area here, okay, around the river Nile Valley as the Egyptian civilization also. But they were just a little bit different from the ancient Egyptian. So let's just have a look on the
Nubian art is as enchanting as it is mysterious. Nubian royalty left behind vast amounts of riches, from jewelry and sculpture to pottery and pyramids. It's all in view now in the largest show the Museum of Fine Arts has ever presented. It's fitting because the MFA literally began digging into the ancient culture more than 100 years ago. In 1916, Museum of Fine Arts Egyptologist George Reisner was among the first archaeologists to excavate Kerma, an ancient city located in Nubia, what is now southern Egypt and Sudan. What he discovered was a treasure trove left by Nubians.
What they give us is an early lesson, which is to be agents of ourselves and to realize ourselves through art, culture, politics, through the expressive means.
What Reisner and the MFA team gathered over the next 20 years of excavation became the largest collection of Nubian artifacts outside the region.
He literally invented the method of archaeological documentation. His meticulous photography, 40,000 glass negatives, and thanks to that, we can reconstruct what he did.
Rita Fried is the curator of Ancient Nubia Now, which offers more than 3,000 years worth of Nubian artifacts.
What we're trying to do is to show you just how remarkable these objects are, how sophisticated they are, how advanced the technology was.
Edmund Barry Gaither is the director of the Museum of the National Center of Afro-American Artists, an MFA partner.
When you come to the end, you have an appreciation of the beauty and aesthetics, of the fine craftsmanship, of the rich variety of kinds of things that were made.
They are pieces that show us how ancient civilizations lived, and from the artifacts discovered in tombs, how they wanted to be remembered. From the ceramics of Kerma to the spectacular jewelry of the Nubian king Pianki, to the mysterious sculptures of its capital, Merowe.
These beautiful tulip-shaped beakers that are a combination of black and red in the same vessel. There's a statue that's about 5 feet tall, a beautiful example of a Nubian king perfectly clothed and adorned with his cap crown. We have beautiful necklaces, large-scale inlays from temple walls. It's really amazing to us how they did it, because it would be hard to reproduce that today.
But what's just as fascinating about these objects is what we don't know about them.
We only wish that the Nubians had left information in their own words for us, as the Egyptians did. They left us no writing.
Most of what was written down about Nubian civilizations came from neighboring Egypt. Today, the MFA acknowledges that archaeologists, including Reisner, looked at Nubia with racial prejudice.
When he saw the amazing material that came out of these sites, he concluded at Kerma, for example, that this material was too good to have been made by Black Africans. It must be Egyptian.
One of the goals of the exhibition, Fried says, is not only to highlight the treasures, but also to set the record straight on Nubia's place in history.
You see a progression of the development of the different styles that we identify as Nubian. In some cases, they're very similar to Egyptian. They take what they want and mold it in their own way.
What an exhibition like this does is it provides well-defined historical brick in a wall that is itself much bigger.
Edmund Barry Gaither also says the exhibition feels like a family reunion.
It is, at a personal level, a little bit like visiting how you imagine your great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers and mothers. At another level, it's to enter a story of another of the great adventures in the human enterprise of civilization.
Here, the MFA distances itself from the racist narrative of its forebears. Nubia no longer lives in the shadow of Egypt, but as an equal civilization that rose, conquered, and created on its own terms.
These people, at every point, had a sense of participation in the world of their times. They were not victims. They were not bystanders. They had interest, and they acted to realize those interests.
So simply, we're speaking today about one of the most important civilizations at the time of the ancient Egyptian. Of course, unfortunately, we do not know much about the Nubian civilization, or even that we do not take care of the Nubian civilization because of the shadow of their neighboring civilization, the ancient Egyptian. At the time of the ancient Egyptian, the Egyptian people, of course, they were the first of everything. That's why we just know a little about the Nubian civilization. But because of the exhibition, we can counter many of their manufactured and also about a lot of their own monuments. Because of this, now we can have an insight about the Nubian civilization. So please open your books, page 283, and just let's read it. Ibrahim, can you start, please?
Yes, sure. Egypt and Nubia flourish. While Egyptian civilization was developing along the northern Nile River, another African civilization took shape on a wide band of fertile land of the southern Nile. The ancient kingdom of Nubia, also called Kush, was located in present-day Sudan. Archaeologists and historians have just begun to document the shifting tides of Nubia's four 4,000 years history.
So we're speaking about two civilizations which have already arose around the fertile valley of the river Nile. To the north, we have the ancient Egyptian civilization, and to the south, we have the ancient Nubian civilization. Of course, both of them had their own distinctive civilization, yet they come counter and share many of the perspective and many of their own vision. Because of being so close to each other, the Nubian people were totally affected by the ancient Egyptian civilization. Even they have already taken their gods to be worshipped, and even they mimicked them in making the pyramids. So both civilization lived along the river Nile Valley, and both of them were affected by each other. As we have already discovered that by trade we can counter sharing culture and ideas. So because they started to trade with each other, the Nubian people were affected by the Egyptian. Nubia and Egypt, of course, two great powers at their own times. Yet
Yes. And Nubia and Egypt, two great powers. From the time ambitious Egyptian pharaohs subdued Nubia, but the Nubians also regained their independence. As a result of conquest and trade, Nubian rulers adopted many Egyptian traditions. They built palaces and pyramids modeled on Egyptian style. They used Egyptian tiles and worshipped Egyptian deities. About 730 BC, the Nubian king Payankhi conquered Egypt. For a century, Nubian kings ruled Egypt, but Nubian armies could not match the iron weapons of the Assyrians who invaded from southwest Asia. Forced to retreat from Egypt, the Nubians returned to the south.
all right, so we're speaking about for many time both of the two civilization of the Nubian civilization and the Egyptian lived side by side. And at what time or one time some of the Egyptian pharaohs invaded Nubia and they ruled the Nubian kingdom. And of course, because they have share common in trade, they started to share ideas and cultural background that the Nubian culture started to adapt the Egyptian idols and symbols and even ways of life by building palaces, temples, and even worshipping the same gods. At one time, when the Egyptian civilization started to decline, the Nubian civilization started to march towards the north in order to take control of Egypt, and they ruled Egypt for approximately 100 years. And still today, in places like Aswan, for example, we have a Nubian culture thriving in that place, and they even have their own language. And still today, they are an Egyptian people. But unfortunately, when the Mesopotamian civilization started to march towards Egypt, unfortunately, the Nubian started to draw back to the south. So we're speaking
Teacher,
about.
can I ask a question?
Yep.
Nubia conquered Egypt.
First, the Egyptian pharaohs conquered the Nubian civilization, and the Nubian people lived under the Egyptian civilization. Okay.
Okay.
But as any other civilization, what goes up must come down. So the Egyptian pharaohs, after their decline, so who was strong enough to invade them was the Nubian people. And we have already studied that while studying the Egyptian civilization. And we said that, if you can remember, the Nubian people did not consider themselves as invaders. The Nubian people, once they took control of Egypt, they didn't consider themselves as invaders, but they ruled the people as their pharaohs because they lived a long time under the Egyptian civilization. So they consider themselves to be Egyptians. So we did not come to invade, but we come to set control over the country, not to invade or not to take control of your lands and your resources, but just to set rule and to set stability and peace on the country. Because after all, Egyptians and Nubian are one. Okay, so the Nubian people adapted many things from the Egyptian that they considered themselves as one with the Egyptian people. Okay, that's why when the Egyptian pharaohs and the family of the pharaohs started to decline, the Nubian marched towards the north so that they can keep Egypt in peace. Okay, Nawaf?
Yes, teacher.
All right. And of course, about 730, the Nubian king Panki, he marched towards the north in order to put the stability on Egypt. To speak about Nubia trade and iron, once again, guys, I need you to put this in your mind. Okay, trade makes impossible. Trade makes impossible. Okay, so if you are sharing ideas, sharing information, you are wanting to control any other country, you need to conquest a country, you need to conquer a country, you need to widen your territories. All of this will just happen because of trade. You need to trade or you need to control trade. So to speak about Nubia and trading iron with the Nubian people. Nawaf, can you read?
Yes, teacher. By 500 BC, Nubian rulers had moved their capital from Nabata to Meru. Meru eventually commanded both the Nile's north-south trade route and the east-west trade route from the Red Sea to North Africa. Along this wide trade network, Nubia sent gold, ivory, animal skins, perfumes, and slaves to the Mediterranean world and Southwest Asia. Meru location was a major reason for its development into a successful center of commerce equally.
Okay. So we're speaking about Mary. Let's just go here. Of course, here is Mary. Of course, Mary here in this place to the river Nile. Okay, it has a very good location to the ancient civilization. At this place of Mary, of course, which is nowadays Khartoum, we are speaking about that here was the city of Kerma. Kerma was the central or the capital city of the Nubian civilization, and then they moved it to Mary. And those two places, they centered their civilization upon these places because of what? Because number one, they have the running water, so they can grow and they can have a stable life. And also in those two places, they have very rich land of minerals. So they have plenty of minerals in those cities, including the gold. And the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, they used many gold in their own manufactured their tombs and also their manufactured goods and even their temples. So they needed the minerals from their southern neighbors, which is the Nubian civilization. So the Nubian people, they started to have all of that minerals and just send it to the Egyptian people as type of trade. And of course, the Egyptian people sent them the wheat, of course, and they started trading. So they had a very good location for trading with their neighboring countries. Even the people of the Mediterranean, see, you have here the Mesopotamian civilization and you have the Greek civilization. Also, they needed both the minerals and the slaves from the Nubian countries. And the Nubian are closer to Central Africa. And Central Africa, they had plenty of wild animals, which they can use the ivory from them. Okay, so the Nubian people, they had some minerals and they had some merchandise, which the civilizations of the Mediterranean needed much, like the Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and also the Greek civilization. Because of all of this, they started to trade with all of these civilizations. Equally important, of course, however, was the region's resources. Mary was rich in iron ore, iron ore, which will later develop into making weapons, supplied by the region's large quantities of timber. The smelting furnace of Merwi produced the iron tools and weaponry needed to feed, control, and defend the kingdom. Today, we have giant heaps of iron waste remain as evidence of the ancient Merwi industry. So the people in Merwi, they started to manufacture the iron from their lands in order to make them weapons, and these weapons will be used in order to control civilization and even defend their own civilization. Any questions so far?
No.
D'accord. Splendor and decline. As any other civilization, of course, what goes up must go down. Then the Nubian civilization shall reach its fall. Monsieur Yusuf?
Yes. Although Nubia absorbed much from Egypt, Nubia culture later followed its own course. For example, after gaining independence from Egypt, Nubians worshipped their own gods, including epidemic leon-headed warrior god at Miore. Artistic styles reflected a greater sense of freedom than Egypt's styles did. Nubians also created their own system of writing using an alphabet instead of hieroglyphics. Unfortunately, the Nubian alphabet has not yet been deciphered. After the joint reign of King Natakamini and Queen Amaniteri in the 1st century AD, the splendor of Nubia's golden age dimmed. Finally, about AD 350, King Izan's armies from the kingdom of Axiom overwhelmed Nubia.
So we're speaking about the civilization and its flourishment and also its decline. They started first to absorb many of the Egyptian cultures, and later, upon having their own independence, they started to have their own specific characteristic in their own life, like worshipping their own gods and even moving the capital city from place to another. Like, for example, this Nubian and Egyptian worshipped many of the same gods and goddesses, including Ammon, of course, the son or the king of all gods, who was often deciphered as Ram. So some people called it Ammon and some people called it Ram. But later they started to have their own gods apart from the Egyptian people. After the joint region of King Natakamani and also her queen Amenetira, both of them in the 1st century AD, the splendor of Nubia started to decline, and the Nubian civilization started to decline, and that was the end of the Nubian civilization. For the North Africa and the ancient world, of course, we were speaking about bingo. To speak about North Africa, what are the civilizations that arose in that area here? What do you know about the civilization in that area? Northern Africa. Let's come closer. Northern Africa, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Mali, Niger, Chad, Sudan. What do you know about the civilization that arose in these regions?
Well, I don't know really anything before the Umayyad and whatever.
Oh no, you must be kidding. Anyone else? Walid, Yusuf, Yazan, Ahmed, Fahd, Salim. In Northern
What's
Africa,
the question, teacher?
In Northern Africa, what civilizations did we have?
Maybe
In Africa, what civilizations did we have? Maybe what? Come on, guys. In Egypt, what did we have?
ancient Egypt, teacher.
Ancient Egyptian civilization. And nowadays, Sudan, we had what? The Nubian
Phoenicians.
civilization.
And Phoenician
The
teacher.
Phoenicians were in the Mesopotamian, here in this place, in the Fertile Crescent, from the Arabian Gulf to the Mediterranean Sea. The Phoenicians were in the Mesopotamian civilization now. We're speaking about North Africa. We have Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization. Nowadays, Sudan, we had the Nubian civilization, and for the rest of these countries, we had a civilization of barbarians, barbarian civilization, barbarian civilization. Sometimes tend to be called the Amazigh civilization, Amazigh civilization. Of course, later the Phoenician people from the Mesopotamia came counter to these people, and of course doing trade, and they connected all of these people, and they even made the city of Marrakesh. So we're speaking about Northern Africa. The Northern Africa actually they held no great civilization apart from the Egyptian civilization and their neighboring the Nubian civilization. Most of the people living in that region, and nowadays Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, and Morocco, they were just Amazighi barbarian. Amazighi barbarian. What is the meaning of barbarian? What is the meaning of barbarian?
The Greeks called people who didn't speak Greek barbarians.
Bravo, 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 bravo. Nice memory. The Greek people, they named those who didn't speak Greek to be barbarian. Right. But the word barbarian itself, yeah, what does it mean, Salim? To call someone a barbarian.
Like strange,
Strange. Okay, in what way?
like he don't live in cities and Bedouins
No.
like
So they don't live in cities. Then they live where and not in their culture. Okay, foreigners. Okay, if they don't live in the city, where will they live?
outside the city.
Where outside the city? In a
Like
town?
nomads, they would travel.
That's it. So they don't live in a city, meaning that they move from one place to another, searching for food and hunting animals. So hunting animals and gathering food, they are nomads. So barbarian means that they were nomads. So once again, for the people from North Africa, apart from the Egyptian civilization and Nubian civilization, most of the people who lived in Northern Africa, they were nothing but barbarians. Barbarian means nomads. Nomads means hunting animals and gathering food. So they didn't have stability, they didn't live in specific cities or villages. All they had were just some tribes and moving from one place to the other, searching for food and hunting animals. Okay?
Yes.
All right, so for North Africa and the ancient world. Ahmed?
yes teacher.
Yeah, can you read, please?
Okay. North Africa and the ancient world. Early African civilizations had strong ties to the Mediterranean world. Trade linked Egypt with Greek and Mesopotamia. Later, Egypt was ruled in turn by the Greeks and Romans. These powers also knew of the rich civilization that lay south of Egypt and valued Nubian exports. Over time, however, Nubia lost touch with the Mediterranean world.
All right, so we're speaking about that people who lived in North Africa, simply they had closer connection with the Egyptian civilization because the Egyptian civilization was a stable one. People lived in Egypt and they harvested their own crops and they started to make the civilization. Consequently, they have some exported. And those exports from Egypt were sent to the people in Northern Africa, which lived in tribes, nomads. Okay, also the people from Nubia, they also had a closer connection with the with Mesopotamia, Greek, and always Egypt, which is frequently called the Mediterranean civilization. Okay, so to speak about that, we need to know that the people from this place, they come counter both the Egyptian and Nubian civilization. In time, when the Egyptian civilization started to decline, the Greek and the Roman, the Greek and the Roman, they came to rule Egypt. And of course, by ruling Egypt, they started to take the manufactured goods and even the raw materials from Egypt and also Sudan. And of course, the people from North Africa had a piece from that cake, which to be ruled by both the Greek and also the Roman. By doing so, they can counter several consequences and also several steps. Like, for example, the Greek and the Roman people, they or these powers knew of rich civilization, the place of South Egypt. So they valued the people here from Nubia, because Nubia they had very rich land out of minerals. So they valued that civilization and they started to take the minerals from Nubia and the groups from Egypt and also gold from Egypt, and also anything that was found in this region was taken by the Greek and also the Roman. So simply we can just say that because other civilization tended to have control over other civilization because of their richness or even their minerals, then they will just do whatever needed in order to have control of the land so that they will take the minerals and even control trade. Put this word on your mind until next session. Trade. Trade is the main reason for conquering any civilization at the ancient times, of course. Any questions so far, grade 9?
Thank you, teacher.
All right, so once again, the African continent, or the continent of Africa, it held many civilizations. We spoke already about the features and the climate change in that continent, and of course the diverse region. We also spoke about Egypt, Nubia, and Northern African civilization, and we shall continue that tomorrow if Allah wills. So, any questions so far? Okay, enjoy the rest of your day and see you tomorrow, great time.
Yes, see you tomorrow.
Okay, bye.